Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're heading all the way to South Africa. We're going to be looking at the private security industry there.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Big industry.
huge, yeah, and I think people might be surprised to know that, like in a place like Durban, uh, there are almost 4 times as many private security guards as there are police officers.
Yeah, that's right. South Africa is dealing with just incredibly high crime rates, and the national police force is just stretched so thin.
Yeah,
So this has led to this huge reliance on private security. It's
yeah.
almost like a parallel system running alongside the official one. It's really complex.
Yeah, it makes you think about what daily life is like in a place
Mhm.
like that,
Yeah.
where, private security patrols are just like a normal part of life.
Yeah.
So to kind of get a glimpse into that world, we're going to be focusing on Nazarin Ali.
Okay.
She's a former bodybuilder, and now she runs her own security company in Durban.
Wow, that's so interesting. Her story is fascinating. She's overcome so much hardship in her life, including being a victim of sexual assault.
Oh, yeah.
And she's just channeled all of those experiences into this fierce determination to protect other people.
Yeah, and she's not afraid of danger.
Yeah.
One of our sources quotes her as saying, "You don't know if you're coming out alive."
Oh, wow.
Gives you a sense of like what's at stake.
Right. It's a dangerous job. There's no doubt about that. Just imagine the pressure of responding to panic alerts, potential criminal activity, all while knowing that any call could turn into a life or death situation.
Yeah, it's like a constant adrenaline rush.
Yeah, definitely.
I can only imagine the courage it takes to face that kind of pressure every single night.
Mhm.
And it sounds like Nazarin handles it all with remarkable strength.
She does. There's actually a story about her disciplining a colleague who showed up drunk for duty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's got this no-nonsense approach to leadership,
Yeah.
which is so essential in an environment like that.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, being a woman in what's still very much a male-dominated field.
Mm.
Did your sources kind of touch on how her male colleagues view her leadership?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is that while she is very firm and assertive,
Right.
she also leads with a strong sense of fairness and empathy.
Okay.
And her team respects her,
Yeah.
both for her competence and her commitment to their safety.
Yeah, that's a powerful combination, strength and empathy.
For sure.
It sounds like her job goes beyond like patrolling the streets, responding to alarms.
You're right. Private security in South Africa often intersects with kind of a darker side of society. Think about violence, business conflicts, personal threats, situations where the lines between right and wrong can get really blurry.
Yeah, it's a lot more complex than I think people realize.
It
And
is.
it sounds like Nazarin is right there, in the thick of it all.
Yeah.
There's a really gripping anecdote about her being called to protect a businessman who literally had a hit put out on his head. It just shows the level of danger she faces on a daily basis.
It really does make you wonder how someone navigates that world without becoming totally hardened or losing their own moral compass.
Yeah, that's a good question. What stood out to you about how Nazarin handles those ethically challenging situations?
What's fascinating about Nazarin is that even in this morally ambiguous field,
Yeah.
she has this really strong ethical code. She refuses to protect criminals even when there's a lot of pressure to do so.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about her character.
It's like she's drawing a clear line in the sand.
That's right.
She's there to protect people, not to enable criminal activity. That takes a lot of integrity,
It does.
especially considering everything that she's been through. I mean, it sounds like those experiences have really fueled her determination to create a safer world, not just for herself, but for others.
Absolutely.
And that kind of brings us to another layer of her story, her relationship with her daughter.
Right.
So Nazarin's daughter actually lives in Yemen, and they haven't seen each other in years.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah, and you just, you wonder how that separation,
Yeah.
that longing for family,
Mm.
kind of impacts her work and her outlook on life.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer of complexity to her story.
Yeah.
On the surface, you see this strong, capable woman leading in this dangerous field.
Mm.
But underneath, there's this deep personal longing
Yeah.
that's really motivating her.
It just makes you realize, like, behind every headline, every statistic, there are real people living these stories, facing challenges,
Yeah.
that most of us can only imagine.
So true. It really underscores the human cost of these broader societal issues we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're looking at a country grappling with this complex web of challenges.
Yeah.
High crime rates, poverty, inequality.
Yeah.
The rise of private security is just one facet of that.
It's like we're seeing a microcosm of all of those larger issues playing out in the private security industry itself. Like for people who can afford it, private security, it gives them peace of mind.
Right.
A way to kind of navigate this dangerous landscape. But then you have to think about those who can't afford that.
Right, exactly.
It creates this system where safety becomes like a commodity.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
only available to some.
Exactly. And it raises all these questions about social equity.
Yeah.
Like, is safety becoming a luxury
Right.
that only certain people can access?
Yeah.
And what does that mean for the country as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really complex issue. Did any of your sources talk about like the long-term consequences of this trend?
Mm-hmm.
Like if more and more people are relying on private security, does that lessen the pressure to address the root causes of crime?
Yeah. It's a valid concern. It's something that policymakers and experts in South Africa are talking about. There's no question that private security is filling a gap.
Right.
But yeah, we need to consider the downsides.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. It makes you wonder what the future holds. Like,
Yeah.
are we moving towards a world where personal safety is increasingly privatized?
It's a good question.
And if so, like, what does that mean for, society as a whole? What does it mean for this idea that we all have a shared responsibility for security?
Yeah. Those are big questions. And like I said, there's no easy answers. But I think by exploring stories like Nazarin's,
Right.
we can at least start to understand this issue on a human level.
Mm-hmm.
We see the courage, we see the resilience, the ethical challenges that
Yeah.
these people face.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that there are real people
Yeah.
behind all of these, systems, making choices and trying to make a difference.
Right. And her commitment to not protect criminals really stood out to me.
You did.
It shows that even in these situations where the lines are blurred, personal integrity can still guide people's actions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And her story also just underscores the very real impact that crime has on individuals and families.
Right.
Like the fact that she hasn't seen her daughter in years because of the situation in Yemen.
Yeah, it's really sad.
It adds another layer of like tragedy
Mm-hmm.
to an already challenging situation.
It makes you realize that we're not just talking about numbers here.
Yeah.
We're talking about mothers who are separated from their kids,
Yeah.
families that are living in fear, individuals who are risking their lives every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's why it's so important to engage with these stories, to understand all the little details and the nuances and the human cost.
Right.
Only then can we have, productive conversations about solutions and how to create a future where safety and security are something that everyone has.
So if we take a step back and look at the big picture here, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What should they be thinking about?
I think the most important thing is to remember that there's no single narrative.
Yeah.
It's a complicated issue with a lot of perspectives,
Mhm.
and it's important to be aware of all of them.
Right.
We need to think critically about private security.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons? What
Yeah.
are the long-term consequences?
So it's about understanding like the whole picture,
Exactly.
right? Not just accepting one side of the story,
Yeah.
but thinking about all the different factors.
For sure. And we also need to remember that there are real people like Nazarin,
Mhm.
people who are trying to do good in a very difficult situation.
Yeah,
Their stories matter and they need to be heard.
absolutely. It's those personal stories
Yeah.
that really make these issues come alive
Mm-hmm.
and remind us why we should care. And ultimately, this deep dive, it's really an invitation
Yeah.
to keep exploring, to learn more about South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
to think about, these bigger questions about security, and to talk about how we can build a future where everyone feels safe. It's not about, like you said, giving people all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about sparking that curiosity and encouraging everyone to, go do their own research.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We focus on Nazarin.
Right.
But there are so many others out there. Security guards, policymakers,
Yeah.
people in those communities, they all have their own perspectives.
Each story just adds, another piece to the puzzle. It's not just about the headlines, it's about the people.
For sure. And that's where you as a listener can really dive deeper, seek out those stories. Think about how they shape your understanding of all of this.
Yeah, it's about engaging with the information
Yeah.
and like letting it challenge your own assumptions. And, maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire you to get involved somehow,
I love
to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, becoming an active participant in the search for a solution.
Yeah.
As you keep exploring this, here's a thought I'll leave you with.
Okay.
What would it take to create a world where private security isn't a necessity, where it's a choice? What would need to change to make safety and security a right for everyone?
That's a really good question. It makes you think about, like, what kind of future we want and what steps we need to take to get there.
And with that, I think we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into South African private security.
Yeah. We hope it was thought-provoking, and we'll see you next time.